What if I told you there is a quote oft-repeated... I've got my AirPods in. It's no good. What if I told you there is a quote in Mormonism oft-repeated that is actually far more problematic than it first appears? Well, let's roll the tape.
Happiness, my brothers and sisters, is the object and the design of our existence.
The prophet Joseph Smith said, "Happiness is the object and design of our existence."
The prophet Joseph Smith taught us, happiness is the object and design of our existence.
The prophet Joseph Smith said, "Happiness is the object and design of our existence."
The prophet Joseph Smith taught,
Happiness is the object and design of our existence.
What you've just heard is a quote sent in 1842 by Joseph Smith to the then 19-year-old Nancy Rigdon. And the quote in and of itself isn't particularly offensive. In fact, taken at face value, it sounds like a celebration of a positive purpose for the life of humans everywhere. But if you'll allow me to sound like a church apologist for just a moment, the first part of the quote sounds banal because it's missing its context. Joseph Smith set up a private meeting with Nancy Rigdon, the daughter of Sidney Rigdon, and made a proposal that Nancy enter into a polygamous relationship with him. Nancy refused, and Joseph left the scene saying he would write to her and explain that it was God's will he should have a polygamous relationship with her. The ensuing letter is known as the Happiness Letter, owing to its opening line.
Happiness is the object and design of our existence.
And the letter goes on to say,
And will be the end thereof, if we but pursue the path which leads to it. And that path is virtue, uprightness, faithfulness, holiness, and keeping all of the commandments of God.
We cannot keep all the commandments without first knowing them, and we cannot expect to know all or more than we now know unless we comply with or keep those we have already received.
However, the letter beyond this opening takes a rather troublesome turn when you consider its context, that being that it is a justification for Joseph Smith's proposal of plural marriage to Nancy Rigdon. This is the part they do not read in General Conference. That which is wrong under one circumstance may be and often is right under another. God said, "Thou shalt not kill." At another time he said, "Thou shalt utterly destroy." This is the principle on which the government of heaven is conducted, by revelation adapted to the circumstances in which the children of the kingdom are placed. Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, although we may not see the reason thereof till long after the events transpire. So how does that play out in the conversation with Joseph Smith and Nancy Rigdon? Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, and that goes for this polygamous relationship that God requires us to enter into, Nancy. You, Nancy, cannot keep all the commandments of God, which is mentioned in the opening of the letter as being the way to happiness, without doing what he commands through me, his servant, by revelation, which in this case is this polygamous relationship. And later, Joseph Smith makes it abundantly clear that this is absolutely about polygamy, because he brings up Solomon and the things that might be considered abominable, and he says those things would be desirable to those who understood the order of heaven not just in part, but in full. I don't think we need to go into the letter any further today to establish that there is far more to it than the parts that are quoted in General Conference, but it is in the description if you want to read the full thing for yourself, and I would encourage you to do so, and then let me know what you think in the comments of what you've read. And one thing is certain, despite attempts to cast doubt on whether Joseph ever wrote this letter, it is attributed to him by leaders of the church at General Conference, as well as in lesson manuals and other church sources. Far from being a letter that promotes happiness, as the opening line would seem to indicate, this letter threatens the happiness of Nancy Rigdon if she doesn't do what Joseph Smith wants. The voice and gravitas of God are used to try and undermine any concerns Nancy Rigdon might have about this situation, and that is the letter that is being quoted from by church leaders. What do you think it means that they quote from such a letter, but never allude to the problematic context in which the quote was made? Is it right that leaders of the church quote a threat as an uplifting gospel principle? Let me know what you think in the comments, and the next time you hear this quote,
Happiness is the object and the design of our existence, and will be the end thereof if we pursue the path that leads to it. And this path is virtue, uprightness, faithfulness, holiness, and keeping all the commandments of God.
I hope you'll remember that far from being a benign fridge magnet slogan, It is the words of a man telling a 19-year-old that her happiness and eternal salvation are at stake if she does not enter into a polygamous relationship with him. Meanwhile, I have nothing to hold over you, the viewers, if you don't subscribe, but it would still be appreciated.